Hi, everybody. We'll get this off here in just a second. Hi, everyone. We'll get going here in just a moment. I'm going to send out one more remind to everybody. And good Sunday evening to you. Hope that you're having a great night and that you've been studying away, watching videos, and all kinds of good stuff. I'll be joining you with my trusty double gulp, as well as some chicken nuggets. And we'll get going here. A couple things just to make sure that you're keeping in mind as you're studying. Just remember that what you're doing right now is you're basically just making sure that you keep yourselves reviewing information right now. Again, you're not learning anything new. This should all be just review. So, yeah, that's the biggest thing. Don't stress over anything along those lines. Allie, you're correct. I have not painted my wall spot yet, and I couldn't think of anything cool to put up tonight. So those are McDonald's Chicken McNuggets, Orson Wang. So yeah, good nutritious food for everybody. So remember, you're reviewing right now. You're not here to, or you're not trying to learn new information. Some people have purchased some of these books. These aren't bad books to have. They're not all that necessary, but they do work out quite well if you do have them. And just look at the reviews. Those books also do have some sample tests in them. You could use those and pick out the information. You should be able to recognize what's from periods 1 through 5 at this point. And you can use this book to take those sample test questions, read their explanations. They're not bad to have, and it's new stuff. So tonight's stuff will be more from a review. We'll do a little bit of review from each particular time period. I'll look at Albert questions that are not the same questions we've looked at before, and so that'll try to keep it on track. For your test tomorrow, there are no essay questions. It's simply 55 questions, multiple choice, roughly equal questions from each time period. So don't worry about anything with any essays, because I've got enough to grade for you guys. As far as updates go for my class, there's information on the top of the APUSH page about grades, test corrections, things along those lines. I've been working on this weekend for you. So with that being said, get your friends to join, and we will get going here. And I'm going to start screen sharing, so you won't see me for a little bit. And make sure that you get your friends to join, and keep the chat to being on topic. That's the most important, so we don't get into anything that's like what you see when you guys game. I don't know how you keep anything straight when you guys are gaming and you're speaking to each other and about whatever else comes to mind. So, but I'll get the Albert up and going here. And we will waste little time getting to the good stuff, and with some analysis. biggest thing to do when you're getting ready for this kind of a test is that you just kind of got to go to bed early. And when you go to bed, like, you just stop looking at it. That's the most important thing. People will oftentimes get themselves all worked up, trying to study till the end of time, and then they'll get themselves worked up, and the anxiety factors in. So when you're done with whatever you're doing tonight to study and prepare, then go to bed and just let it happen, and come in tomorrow morning, and relax and let all the Zen flow and all that good stuff, and you should be fine. So let's go to screen share. It's going to go. It might go wacky for just a moment here. Here we go. And let's take a look at your Albert U.S. history. Let's look at some European imperial competition. And let's look at the age of discovery. Let's do some long-term, just let it happen. Let's do some long-term consequences here. So what we have here is a digital map. Let's see if I can expand that. That's about as big as that will get. We've got a map here of Spain and its possessions. So we have Spain and its possessions. There's Spain itself. We can see that the South American coastline is colonized largely by Spain. Orange is Portugal and its possessions. So Portugal has some places down here in what will be Brazil. And you can see here along the West African coast through right around the the Horn of Africa with the Cape of Good Hope, and then some places in India. The Spanish have some places here in the Spice Islands. Okay, so and it shows you certain discoverers and their routes. So let's take a look. So the voyages depicted on this map led to which long-term consequences for Europe? A, there was a steady decline in population. B, Europeans gained access to new sources of mineral wealth. C, there was a shift in powers from countries bordering the Atlantic to those bordering the Mediterranean. Or D, the European economy began to shift from capitalism to feudalism. Collins got us going with B. Ryan says B. Orson says B. Daniel says B. Got anybody else? Miguel says B. Zubair says B. Well, let's submit B. And you are correct. Europeans get a lot of access, particularly to silver, but to some gold, which is also very, very important for the aspect of understanding that if you go back to like world history, silver going into Europe, particularly Spain, had a big effect on inflation of prices, and we know that the other ones, we don't see a shift to the Mediterranean. This is the opposite of what happened. Feudalism is what was going on in Europe before the age of discovery, and of course it's also the emerging from feudalism to a capitalism. And then, of course, there's a steady decline in population. Well, that's not true. We know that Europe is going to have a boom in population over a short time after this. Let's look at the next one. Same map. We have, which of the following was a key motivation for European leaders to sponsor the voyages of discovery? A, to develop alliances with other European nations. B, the desire to find more lucrative trading routes. C, the development of free trade zones. Or D, to study and adopt the religions of non-Europeans. I'm getting some B's here. That's good. Any other answers? Okay, we're getting the B's. Nice. Okay, so remember that one of the things that you're looking at is, remember, we go back to the time before the Age of Discovery when Europeans were, many European nations, particularly England, but they were doing things like the Crusades. They believed that they were going to somehow retake the Holy Land from Muslims, particularly Jerusalem. And when they did that, they came into contact with all these other things that were going on while the Muslim empires were flourishing. And one of those is overland trade routes and sea trade routes that were bringing back exotic spices and merchandise that they had never seen before. So the Europeans, as they start to emerge into the scientific revolution and they have some advancements in navigation, they're going to figure out, hey, why don't we get more lucrative trade routes, and why don't we cut out those people in the middle who basically jack up all the prices and make it so that it's really expensive for us to get things like cool spices. And so they end up setting out to explore, so to speak, how they can get those trade routes. So that's important. Nicely done, my friends. Let's take a look at the next question. Same stimulus. Which of the following did not enable Europeans to establish colonies and trading posts in the New World and in Asia? Improvements in maritime technology, such as the sail and compass, advances in cartography, the formation of joint stock companies, or the invention of ironclad warships? Okay, so I've got D's going on here with the exception of one C. So the invention of ironclad warships is what we're hearing. Well, I see Colin has changed his answer. All right, and let's take a look. You are correct. They're not used until the 19th century. These are all going to be wood hull ships. But we do know that these other things, without looking at all that, improvements in maritime technology, such as the sail and the compass, were crucial advancements in some of the technological and navigational techniques that come about, because they wouldn't have been able to do this without having the ability to advance the sail, which is going to allow them to travel further and faster. The compass is particularly necessary in order to figure out navigation. Cartography, if that's a word that's new to you, it's a word to own. Cartography is map making, and so advances in map making and being able to make maps that were more geographically accurate were absolutely necessary to map things like ocean currents, prevailing wind routes, which routes the winds took, and to be able to figure out where they were at. Just remember, they hadn't bumped into North and South America yet, so they didn't realize that was there. And the formation of joint stock companies is what allowed the finances that would enable the Europeans to not only travel, but to establish the colonies that end up happening. And this is particularly true of the British colonies. So good, nicely done. So happy to see this kind of scholarship on a Sunday night. All right, let's see if it's going to let us go next. And we should have a new stimulus here. Okay, so here we have Richard Hakluyt. Voyages touching the discovery of America and the islands adjacent. And this was written in 1582. Let's look at the excerpt. I marvel not a little, right worshipful, that since the first discovery of America, which is now full 80 years, After so great conquests and planting of the Spaniards and Portuguese there, that we of England could never have the grace to set fast footing in such fertile and temperate places as are left as yet unpossessed of them. But I conceive great hope that our time approaches, that the time approaches, and now is that we of England may share and part stakes, if we will ourselves, with both with the Spaniard and the Portuguese, in part of America and other regions yet undiscovered. So this question is going to ask about historical context, and let's see. What best explains the historical concept of the excerpt? Spain and Portugal attempted to negotiate with England for control of Florida. B. England fell behind Spain and Portugal in the competition to build an empire in the New World. C. England proposed a joint venture with Spain to colonize areas that had not been colonized by Portugal. Or D. England sought a way to end their efforts to colonize in the New World. We're getting some B's, lots of B's. By the law of 4 responses, at least. I've got B, so let's choose B and take a look. Ooh, 100% correct. Spain and Portugal controlled much of the New World. In fact, they had to have a treaty between themselves to determine who would get to claim what, the Treaty of Tordesillas. England did not step up right away to create colonies. And this particular passage says that, yes, they're there, but there are yet undiscovered areas, and that desire to compete, most likely, is the best term, with Spain, mostly Spain, but Portugal too, is going to lead them to creating their 13 colonies. We know that Florida was completely controlled by Spain. That's going to continue until 1819. European nations compete at an increased rate during the 16th century. So Spain and England are not going to cooperate with each other. And in fact, this little line here, which I can't highlight for you, but remember that when you get to the end of the 1500s, England is regularly basically pirating Spanish ships that have all the gold. And while there were English explorers in the early 1500s, they did not colonize like the Spanish did, and eventually the French as well before them. So nicely done, my friends. Let's take a look at a new one. Same stimulus. Based upon this perspective in the excerpt, Hakluyt would be most likely involved with which future English event? The ending of the slave trade, the settlement of Jamestown, the Treaty of Tordesillas, or the French and Indian War? This should be an easy one for you. Got B's all over the place. So let's go with the B. And the settlement of Jamestown is correct. No, it's not the Treaty of Tortillas, as much as you'd like it to be, Colin, but good try. Good show there, my friend. But we're looking at why England has not yet established a colony, and so that's going to lead not long after this to the establishment of Jamestown. And as it says here, this author is instrumental in securing that authorization, and that results with Jamestown being settled in 1607. We know that the British are all about slave trade and will be until 1833. The Treaty of Tordesillas, not Tortillas, is between Spain and Portugal, which we talked about just a little bit ago. And the French and Indian War is way after this. He would have been long gone at this point. So, okay, let's go. Same stimulus. on the diverse voyages, England was motivated to follow these recommendations for all the following except their desire to be an international empire to compete with rival powers like Spain and Portugal. B, their need for raw materials and natural resources to fuel economic growth. C, their need to import slaves to work in domestic industries. Or D, the potential of using the New World as a market for British-produced goods. We're getting C, 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 C. Good to see some diverse names coming up here. And yes, C is correct. While they did participate in the slave trade, it was not for them to bring back to Europe. And slaves that were captured, as this says, went to the New World and worked largely on plantations, large numbers of which, more than what came to what were the 13 colonies, large numbers of which went to the Caribbean. So England was competitive with other European powers, and it was just part of that. And B and D are part of the triangular trade, and that's essentially what drove much of that. So, Rip Colin, sorry, Rip. Okay, we have a new stimulus. Letter of Columbus to Luis de Saint Angel, announcing his discovery in 1493. As I know you will be rejoiced at the glorious success that our Lord has given me in my voyage, I write this to tell you how in 33 days I sailed to the Indies with the great fleet that the illustrious king and queen, our sovereigns, gave me, where I discovered a great many islands inhabited by numberless people, and of all I have taken possession for their highnesses by proclamation and display of the royal standard without opposition. Hispaniola is a marvel. Its hills and mountains, fine plains, and open country are rich and fertile for planting and for pasturage, and for building towns and villages. The seaports there are incredibly fine, and as also the magnificent rivers, most of which bear gold. The trees, fruits, and grasses differ widely from those in Juana. There are many spices and vast mines of gold and other metals in this island. They have no iron, nor steel, nor weapons, nor are they fit for them, because although they are well-made men of commanding stature, they appear extraordinarily timid. The only arms they have are sticks of cane, cut when in seed, with a sharpened stick at the end, and they are afraid to use these. Okay. Christopher Columbus wrote this letter for all of the following reasons, except A, to convince prominent Spaniards such as Luis de Saint Angel of the value of trading with the people of Hispaniola, to heighten his prestige in the eyes of the Spanish crown. C, to communicate to de Saint Angel the riches and resources to be found in the New World, or D, to provide evidence of the ease with which the native peoples could be subjugated by the Spaniards. We got a D. So, Ryan, you've asked both D and C. In this case, one is correct. What is the most specific answer, knowing that we're looking at all of these reasons are why he wrote this letter, except one? Which one is not the reason? So, Ryan, what does that tell you? That he says that they were timid but kept talking about gold. Okay, so we have Ryan and Zubair, excuse me, going with D. But Willie has just said, oh, I missed the accept. Interesting. So I've got D, C, and I have a B. Wouldn't it be B if there was the accept? You guys are all over the place on this one. So now I've got some A's, I've got B's. Like, since the accept is there, it should be B. Well, I don't know. I have now 1, 2 A's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 B's. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 A's. How many C's did we have? Let's see. Let's go up here. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 C's. So C's are winning. I've got 5 A's now, but C has won. So I'm going to go with C because that is the one that has won the most votes. Ooh, we have a tie. Devaki has come in and given us a tie. Ooh. I need a tiebreaker. Okay, there's the tiebreaker. Jiho, it's all on you, buddy. Here we go. A is correct. Neither Columbus nor the Spanish crown had any intention of trading with the native peoples of Hispaniola, but rather intended to plunder their wealth and resources for Spain's imperialistic ambitions. And B, Columbus, in writing his letters, sought not only to convey factual information, but to flatter the crown and aggrandize or enlarge his own position as the discoverer of the New World. And C or D are both incorrect because he talks about everything that he can get. So if you're looking at this was a good discussion question prompter for you, in that, one, looks like many of you did not see the accept, which is an important thing to make sure you're looking for. Accept is the downfall of many of you. You seem to fail to see that when you're looking at your quizzes. And when I hear you guys going over your quizzes, you realize, oh, it was an accept and you didn't read it correctly. And I don't know how else to fix that other than to tell you that you need to slow down and read what the question asks of you. And then reasoning out your answer, you'd have to look for, in this one, which one of these isn't true. If you go back to the reading passage, to the stimulus, it talks all about how wonderful it was that the king and the queen gave him the boats. And Abby Young, you are correct. They didn't really trade with the Indians that they find there. They wanted to take everything from them. Here it talks about how wonderful it is, which is interesting because it says most of which bear gold in the rivers, which there's no way that it's showing that. I mean, we know that he didn't come back with tons and tons of gold, and the rivers aren't running with gold and never were. And that they were saying that on this island, I mean, he's kind of outright lying, but he's definitely not talking about trading with these people. He's talking about heightening his prestige in the eyes of the crown. He wants to make sure he's being very flattering to them. he's communicating about these riches and resources he says he found, and he wants to show that they can be subjugated well. And if you look at this particular question, what should pop out to you about, say, A and D? You've got a hint of what's different about A and D. What should pop out to you about A and D? They are mutually exclusive, George says. Correct. Why would you subjugate? Why would you subjugate the natives if you were going to trade with them? And so, remember, a major test-taking skill that many of you probably have learned in your SAT classes that you've taken, some of you all summer. And what you notice is these two things work with each other. And so these things, they don't work with each other. They work against each other. And that's going to be the biggest key to you, that one of these two is correct. And I point this out to many of you when you come to see me about your quiz corrections and we go over them, how if you look for the two that are completely contradictory to each other, you'd be finding that you'd be probably right down to the right two very quickly. Colin, you wrote, but Columbus was told by the crown to create commercial ties with the native peoples until they could take over the land for themselves. Okay, so beyond that fact, let me tell you, or beyond that opinion of yours, let me tell you why you need to be careful. Because this is AP land, and this is College Board. You're supposed to use this stimulus to answer this question for this stimulus, and that's not going to be something that would be supported by the way the question is asked. The question asks which one of these isn't correct. And if you look at these particular three are clear. You can't really dispute these three based upon the stimulus that you've been given. This is not part of the stimulus that you've been given. It's not mentioned there. It's not discussed in there. It's not at all given any indication that they're going to do anything with commercial ties. It talks about, in fact, when mentioning them, that while they're great, they're timid, they don't know how to use their weapons well, and that they could be easily overtaken. So they don't have weapons because they don't have any need for them. They're extraordinarily timid. And if you look at this particular passage, it's not going to give you the answer that's leading from what you're saying. So what's important is striking the balance between things that you might know from your studying, things that you may know from other studying that you've done, but keeping in mind to do what's directed of you in that passage. And in this passage, that wouldn't necessarily work well. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm glad you said that, Colin. Okay, this one is going to be a question that's better when you are doing the end of the year. So I'm going to go away from this for a minute because it's later. We're going to skip that one. And we're going to go same stimulus. Let's look at this particular question. The discovery of the New World was a turning point in world history, in the history of the world, in terms of situating American history as part of that history. So in all of the following ways except A, Europe would no longer succumb to epidemics such as the plague, but would now only export its diseases to the New World. B, new trade routes from Europe to the Americas would be realized and would greatly increase the amount and variety of goods available to Europeans. C, the discovery of gold and silver in the New World would facilitate the rise of commercial revolution. Or D, the slave trade from Africa to the Americas would begin in earnest, with millions of Africans embarking on the Middle Passage for the next several centuries. Okay, we got some overwhelming A's here. I'm going to go ahead and submit A based on your variety of responses that are all the same. You are correct. One thing that's really important here, Europeans would no longer succumb to epidemics such as the plague. Well, that's just crazy. People don't not succumb to epidemics. And until we get to modern vaccination, you can't really say that any particular disease is completely eradicated. And as we're actually witnessing in our own time, some diseases that were thought to be eradicated aren't, because people aren't uniformly vaccinating. So that alone would make that a statement that's really not, that's really worthy of being chosen, because it's not that accurate anyway. But that part here where it says would now only export its diseases to the New World, that's the one that's there to throw you, because you're going to know that the native populations in North America and South America, for that matter, are going to be very susceptible to diseases that were very common in Europe and were not as well transmitted any longer. So good. All right, let's go to the next question set. New stimulus. Bartolomé de las Casas, brief account of the devastation of the Indies, 1542. These people are the most guileless, the most devoid of wickedness and duplicity, the most obedient and faithful to their native masters and to the Spanish Christians whom they serve. They are by nature the most humble, patient, and peaceable, holding no grudges, free from embroilments, neither excitable nor quarrelsome. They are very apt to receive our holy Catholic faith, to be endowed with virtuous customs, and to behave in a godly fashion. Yet into this sheepfold, into this land of meek outcasts, there came some Spaniards who immediately behaved like ravening, wildest beasts, wolves, tigers, or lions that had been starved for many days. So this is Bartolomé de las Casas, a brief account of the devastation of the Indies. You have a second excerpt from Juan Sepulveda, which says, the Spanish have a perfect right to rule these barbarians of the New World and the adjacent islands, who, in prudence, skill, virtues, and humanity, are as inferior to the Spanish as children to adults, or women to men. For there exists between the two as great a difference as between savage and cruel races, and the most merciful between the most intemperate and moderate and temperate, and I might even say between apes and men. Okay. So the excerpts above were written into response to which of the following? Growing concerns over the treatment of American Indians by Spanish plantation owners, the large-scale assaults on Spanish settlements by the Aztec and Incan armies, the growth of the African slave trade, the growing rivalry between the Spanish and Portuguese concerning land claims in the New World. You're all saying A's. Now, before I choose that, can you give me any specific examples? Can you remember specific examples that relate to maybe growing concerns over the treatment of American Indians by Spanish plantation owners? where that might be a topic or a thing. Colin Campbell has said the Pueblo Revolt. Felipe has said encomienda system and Pueblo Revolt. George has come up with encomienda. Aaron has said the same thing. Good. Zubair seconds that. And let's submit your answer. Popes Rebellion. Okay, nice. Nice, Miguel. Let's see what you say. The grammar is throwing me. Is it concerns about the plantation owners or concerns of the plantation owners? So it is over the treatment by the Spanish plantation owners. So treatment of them by the owners. So let's see. Concerns about abuses of the Spanish against American Indians were raised by Spanish missionaries. Charles V actually held hearings, but this is one to keep in mind. Bartolome de las Casas is a Dominican friar, and he's the one that really, we see his writings are very critical of the Spanish who settle in the New World, and particularly their treatment. We know that their treatment was very harsh, and that you do have things like Popes Rebellion, which obviously is an example of where the natives rebelled against the Spanish to a great extent. So good. Impressed with you guys. Okay. Let's see if we're going to get to next here. Here we go. It's going to let me scroll up here. Same stimulus. Here's a similarity. Both Las Casas and Sepulveda most likely shared the same goal of A, converting the natives to Christianity, B, undermining the authority of the Spanish king, C, criticizing the behavior of some Spanish officials in the New World, or D, advocating the use of African slaves in the New World. We got 4 A's. Get some more A's. Sounds like you guys are pretty convinced it's A. You are correct. They might have had differences in how that was supposed to happen, but they did believe that conversion of the natives to Christianity was a good thing. Here's one where I think this is an interesting line. Sepulveda believed that it should be an obligation the Spanish had. Las Casas believed it would be a religious option to convert them. So in other words, they would attempt to reason with them to convert as opposed to forcing them to convert. And so that's where you have the two different perspectives of Spanish explorers / colonizers on what they should do with the natives in regard to religion. Okay. Which of the following, same stimulus, which of the following groups would most likely have supported the argument put forth by Sepulveda? Native American tribal leaders, Spanish missionaries, Spanish plantation owners in the New World, or English and Dutch merchants. So this is the part from Sepulveda. So I've got some B's and C's. So Colin changes answer. So we're now unanimously at C. Nicely done. So C is the correct answer. He defends the Spanish landowners. They would be most likely to agree with him. So we know that, okay, that's kind of a given. I would hope that Native American tribal leaders are not going to agree that they are somehow similar to apes, or children to adults. Spanish missionaries, well, that's a trickier one. I would think that you would choose between B or C, because Spanish missionaries are going to definitely want the conversion to Christianity, but not all Spanish missionaries did it the same way. In this sense, though, given these four options, the text of Sepulveda's statement would lead you more to C. And if you remember, when we talked about the differences between the Spanish, the French, the English, and the Dutch, what was it that the English and really the Dutch were only there for so long? But when you're looking at the English and the Dutch, what do you remember? Remember those, when it came to the natives, what were their statements? Can you remember? You did a chart, and this was part of your chart. Okay, the Dutch want to trade. But you remember lead me, follow me, or get out of my way? Tamar, you said they settled more often, so they pushed them away. So are you meaning they, meaning the English? So you guys are answering ahead of my question, which is awesome. That's fine. So you're correct. The English wanted the natives to get out of the way. The Dutch and the French were much more cooperative with forming. I like how you said forming alliances, finding ways to trade, and of course, with the French in particular, there is a desire to convert them to Christianity, but that is not the complete reason why they're there. And the Spanish were follow me, do what I say. So the English were get out of my way, and the Spanish were follow me. So that's awesome, you guys. Awesome. Glad to review that point with you. I think we have a new one. So let's look at one more. Christopher Columbus. The year has got to be wrong on that. It should be 1493. And Tamara, you're correct. The English wanted this expand and get land. You're correct. Love it. All right, let's take a look at this. So Christopher Columbus says, for I knew that they were a people who could be more easily freed and converted to our holy faith by love than by force, gave to some of them red caps and glass beads to put round their necks, and many other things of little value, which gave them great pleasure, and made them so much our friends. It appeared to me to be a race of people very poor in everything. They have no iron, their darts being wands without iron, some of them having a fish's tooth at the end. They should be good servants and intelligent, for I observed that they quickly took in what was said to them, and I believe that they would easily be made Christians, as it appeared to me they had no religion. Okay, so question says, which of the following best describes the Spanish colonial system established in the New World? A, the Spanish had built a system based on direct control and exploitation of the natives. B, Spanish created a system that emphasized local control. C, the Spanish encouraged the removal of natives from their land. Or D, the Spanish established trading posts with limited contact with natives. All right, you guys are saying A. Let's ask Magic 8 Ball if it's an A. And you are correct. The Spanish model of colonization relied heavily on tight control. Colin Campbell, but what about the viceroys? Aren't they pretty loosely owned colonies? Colin, you're bringing too much into Spanish colonization for U.S. history, my friend. You don't have to get into that kind of detail about Spanish colonization. If you just remember that the Spanish, the Spanish colonized in North America, we're looking at general patterns of colonization and how that colonization worked in regard to natives with relationships with the natives in terms of what we need to know for APUS history. So don't worry about the viceroys, okay? So, good. This excerpt reveals which of the following about how European explorers understood the natives they encountered. A, they poorly understood the native peoples they encountered and hoped to change their lifestyles. B, they showed great respect for the native peoples they encountered. C, they hoped to glorify the native lifestyles in order to spark reform in Europe. Or D, they showed very little interest in the native peoples. Okay, I'm getting lots of A's. That's good. This is an easy one for you. They definitely poorly understood them. We have one more on this, and then we'll go on to British colonization. Same stimulus. The excerpt reflects which of the following goals of Spanish exploration of the New World: aiding the American Indians in developing trade with the other Europeans, subjugating and exploiting the American Indians and their natural resources. C, protecting the American Indians from attacks by rival groups. Or C, learning from and adopting the beliefs and practices of the American Indians. Excuse me. So yeah, B. B, 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 B. Oops, sorry, B. I'm going to submit that for you. And you're correct. Yeah, that's a pretty easy one. I don't think we have to spend any time on that one. So let's go to our study guide. Now we did, let's go into some British colonization from 1607 to 1754. If I remember correctly, I don't like some of these questions from the British because they tend to be kind of they can have lots of little things. Okay. Yes, we can go with some of these. Ooh, got some good ones here. Okay. Let's do first. Let's do this topically. And let's look at Let's do Jamestown. Okay. Jamestown's labor needs. The experiences of an indentured servant in Virginia. Richard Frethorn, 1623. My most humble duty remembered to you, hoping in God of your good health, as I am myself am at the making thereof. This is to let you understand that I, your child, am in most heavy case by reason of the country, which is such that it causeth much sickness, such as the scurvy and the bloody flux, and divers other diseases, which maketh the body very poor and weak. And when we are sick, there is nothing to comfort us. For since I came out of the ship, I never ate anything but peas and loblolly, which is basically, when it says water gruel, think of it like um, gross oatmeal. As for deer or venison, I never saw any since I came into this land. There is indeed some fowl, but we are not allowed to go get it, but must work hard both early and late for a mess of water gruel and a mouthful of bread and beef. A mouthful of bread for a penny a loaf must serve 4 men, which is most pitiful. You would be grieved if you did know as much as I do when people cry out day and night, oh, that they were in England without their limbs, and would not care to lose any limb to be in England again, yea, though they beg from door to door. For we live in fear of the enemy every hour. Yet we have had a combat with them, and we took 2 alive and made slaves of them. But it was by policy, for we are in great danger. For our plantation is very weak by reason of the death and sickness of our company. Okay. That's some light reading for you. All right, let's take a look at which of the following intended to provide Jamestown with additional settlers and indentured servants. Bacon's Manifesto, the Declaration of Rights and Grievances, the Head Right System, or the Mayflower Compact. Okay, before I submit it, what was the Head Right System? Nice. Okie dokie. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and submit this because, it could maybe be the right answer. I mean, I don't know, but let's see what it comes up. Oh, yes. Um, so there were incentives to bring over people to work as indentured servants. And so let's take a look at the other ones here and do this as a review. What is Bacon's Manifesto? Philippe, that is the most mathematical answer I've ever seen. I'm frightened. Although I should completely praise you for such a wonderful application of math in an interdisciplinary way. I'm still frightened. Anyway, Bacon's Manifesto, something from Arby's. Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, so Daniel says he thinks of Bacon's Rebellion from that, though. Philippe says Bacon wrote about harsh conditions and frustration from not getting land. Okay, yes, Philippe, you're onto that. That's good. And Daniel, when you talk about Bacon's Rebellion, you have that. Orson says indentured servants got upset and started shooting. Okay, I think that's a pretty good thing. The manifesto is the written complaint, and the rebellion is what came from such complaints. What is the Mayflower Compact? The first self-governance document. Okay, Daniel. Good. Can we expand on that a little bit? So, what do we mean by the first self-governance document? Okay, Abby's gotten a little more specific there. First self-government in the New World. Well, what's that mean? Can you give me some of the specifics about the reason that document was written? Orson says that there was an early form of government people in the Mayflower wrote out because they were in ungoverned territory. Nice. George Chang says the Constitution-like document written by the Pilgrims on the Mayflower that had them agree to follow rules given by the leaders in government. Okay. It was like to establish how they're going to run the colony. All right, good. It was an agreement. Yes, it was, Janina. Now, in that agreement, Zubair, let's see, Zubair comes up with something beyond what George said. What can we say about how that would be run? How would they agree to follow rules? How would the rules be made or agreed upon? Majority rule, Michelle. Awesome. All right. That works for me. Let's go on. Super. All right. Which of the following events resulted from the violence with Native Americans described by Frethorn? Stono Rebellion, Bacon's Rebellion, Liza's Rebellion, or Nat Turner's Rebellion? Dun, dun, dun. If anybody gets this wrong, it is circle of shame minus and a penalty of minus 3 billion points from life. No, you're not in the circle of shame. No one's really in the circle of shame, but you're saying it's the Stono Rebellion. I'm harsh, like indentured servitude. You're all in the circle of shame. Oh my goodness, we just talked about that. So I totally can't even right now. I'm face palming. I'm making that Patrick Stewart face from the memes. The really face palm. Literally, I'm face palming. I'm face palming as you guys totally write this. John C. Cal. Good night. Oh. We just talked about Bacon's Rebellion and the Bacon's Manifesto and all this other crap. They weren't getting their lands. It did involve the natives. It did involve the natives because how did Bacon's Rebellion involve the natives? Tell me that. Okay, I'll stop. I'll stop showing my frustration. I'll go back to the screen share. See, I thought Bacon's Rebellion was about indentured servants. Governor was nice with the native. Bacon wanted their land. But Bacon was a liar who lied about lack of protection. I don't know about that one, Ryan. Settlers tried to encroach upon the land. Bacon was angry at the Virginia governor because he did not let them expand because of Native Americans. Yep. So Bacon was a meanie. Okay. Well, maybe because he rebelled and killed people. I don't know, but yes, you are correct. All this here, Bacon's Rebellion was about indentured servants who couldn't get their land because they weren't allowed to expand because they were going to have conflicts with Native Americans, so they weren't allowed. Remember here where it says, let's see, there is some foul, but we're not allowed to go get it. We live in fear of the enemy every hour, but yet we have yet had a combat with them. Yet we have had a combat, excuse me. So there's a little hint that they're not allowed to, they're living in fear all the time. They're not allowed to go out there. But even then, this is testing your actual knowledge. So if you're looking here, choice B is correct, and you guys described it. Let's read it like a news announcer. Tired of the House of Burgesses unwilling to support, excuse me, let's do this over again. Cut, take, here we go, action. Tired of the House of Burgesses' unwillingness to support them in conflicts against the natives, former indentured servants living on the borderlands organized behind Nathaniel Bacon. Feeling that their representative government in Virginia favored the wealthy over their larger population, former indentured servants heeded Bacon's call to march on Jamestown and have their grievances heard. Though the rebels damaged buildings in the capital and expressed their frustration, the rebellion was put down and conditions failed to improve in colonial Virginia. So, the Stono Rebellion, if you've never heard of that, you might want to jot it down. It wasn't big in the class. However, it is something that has at times appeared on the AP exam. So it was a slave insurrection that occurred in 1739 in South Carolina. Liza's Rebellion was in New York over the Dominion of New England. And Nat Turner's Rebellion was a slave rebellion in 1831. So, alright, here we go. We should have another little easy one here to remind us about indentured servitude. Struggles described by Fred Horn foreshadowed which of the following developments in the colonial Chesapeake? The development of a rigid hierarchy with planters at the top, the development of extensive industrial manufacturing, the increasing Powhatan dominion over tidewater regions into the late 18th century, or the development of a vibrant middle class of merchants. George Cheng says A. All right. Let's see if you're right. Hooray, you are correct. This doesn't happen in the Chesapeake, and you will get some industrialization much, much later in the 19th century, but it's not going to be extensive by any means. Um, Increasing power and dominion over the tidewater regions, well, that's not really going to be something that happens. Um, you do have your famous examples of like John Smith and Pocahontas and Metacomet. Sorry, whoops, wrong place in the colonies. Bad, Mr. Vanover. I am now in the circle of shame, and because I'm your teacher, I just got 5 billion points deducted from life. And the vibrant of a the development of a vibrant middle class of merchants. Where are you going to find that? Abby Young says it's New England. Is New England, Daniel B., where we're going to find the vibrant middle class of merchants? Daniel says C in English, in Spanish, to answer a question about the New England region settled by the English. Philippe says there wasn't a middle class. Yeah, not. Yes, it was a middle class of sorts. Let's say. Let's see what they say. While poor whites were between wealthy planters at the top and slaves at the bottom, they did not constitute a middle class consistent with the understanding of the concept. Um, Often the middle class is assumed to be economically stable. This doesn't comment on where you're going to find them because obviously it's not part of the question, but I would agree, Philippe, there isn't a middle class in the South. You're either like rich, poor, or slave at that time in history, after this time in history, sorry. Um, so, um, Daniel Big, you're not bad, and you've not lost all your points in life. I just took away more points from my life than anybody's, so I made a mistake. So, Abby, I would say that you have what we would call a middle class by our standards today in New England. Um, it was mostly a merchant class. Remember that when we talked about things, there was a day where I put on the board saying that I put the Salem witch trials, Leisler's rebellion, um, and I put another rebellion. I think I might have even put Bacon's rebellion. But I put on the board that there was something in common that you could find about these. And besides the fact that you determined that you as a class determined there was unrest about wealth in general, in terms of the people, we came up with the idea that people were much more willing in the New World to expect that they had some sort of growing wealth, that they had concerns about the fact that they weren't gaining that wealth or that they were not being ruled by people of their own class. We talked about the fact that in New England, and particularly, we talked about theories that in the Salem witch trials, that in the part of Salem, how there had been more and more people that would be considered part of a growing merchant class, and that the old Puritan established families of Salem looked down upon them because of the fact that they weren't seen as being as holy and pure as the farming folk. So there you go. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Which factors revealed in the passage above best describes the tensions that led to Bacon's rebellion in colonial Virginia? The price of tobacco was such that average Virginians couldn't afford to grow or buy it. Average Virginians could not earn enough income from the tobacco they farmed and were not helped by the economic policies of the Crown or the Indians who inhabited the land they wanted. Free market trade policies imposed by the Crown on the colonies made competition against foreign countries too fierce to make a profit, or Native American massacres on white Virginian colonists over land conflicts grew to such an alarming levels, the colonists had no choice but to rebel. Okay, you guys are going with B. And you're correct. Nicely done. So you guys already went through all of this. It was the result of former white indentured servants over limited opportunities. There you go. All right. Let's go one more question on this one, and we'll go to another topic. Which of the following statements explains why Bacon's rebellion occurred in the South and not New England? A. Southern colonists were by nature more rebellious than New Englanders since they immigrated to the New World in protest against religious persecution by the Crown. B. The Southern economy depended on agriculture and the large-scale use of land as well as indentured servants. There were few indentured servants in New England because Puritan religious beliefs forbade the use of them. Or D. New England was governed by more democratic principles than the colonial South was and would have never allowed such a rebellion to transpire. Sarah, I just now seeing something about your question. Sarah, I'll have to table that until I'm done with Bacon's rebellion in New England. Sorry, Bacon's rebellion in the South and not New England. So right now we're still in colonial times. So let's see. Southern economy depended on agriculture, you're saying, and that is a correct answer. So that fertile terrain is all about those cash crops. We don't have any need for a Bacon's rebellion. We actually changed. We changed stimulus, but good. You didn't even have to look at the stimulus. But you're right. This is why you would have a Bacon's rebellion in the South and not New England. There's not a need or a large need for indentured servants in New England. It wasn't a major focus. That's not to say you would not find people who worked as what we would say is an indentured servant in New England. It doesn't mean that you'll never find any evidence of such a thing, but it certainly isn't going to be a major factor in the settlement of the region like it was in the South. So, but let's take a look at this. This is a passage. Let's read this really quick. The occasion of this rebellion is not easy to be discovered, but 'tis certain there were many things that concurred towards it. 4 things may be reckoned to have been the main ingredients towards main ingredients towards this intense commotion, vis-a-vis first, the extreme low price of tobacco and the ill usage of the planters in the exchange of goods for it, which the country, with all their earnest endeavors, could not remedy. Secondly, the splitting of the colony into properties contrary to the original charters, and the extravagant taxes which they were forced to undergo to relieve themselves from those grants. Thirdly, the heavy restraints and burdens laid upon their trade by Act of Parliament in England. Fourthly, the disturbance given by the Indians, of which they are all in their order. So, yeah, I can find you different questions. Let's go to back to your question list. Yeah, actually, Jiho, remember you're in a school setting. Find you some hard ones. I don't want to do benefits of tobacco because it takes us off that. We went over Bacon's Rebellion. We talked about Mayflower Compact. We talked about motivations for New England settlement. Let's talk about the foundations of Pennsylvania. All right, on track, children. Okay, William Penn, Pennsylvania Charter of Privileges of 1701. I do hereby grant and declare that no person or persons inhabiting this province or territories who shall confess and acknowledge one Almighty God and profess him or themselves obliged to live quietly under the civil government shall be in any case molested or prejudiced because of his or their conscientious persuasion or practice, nor be compelled to frequent or maintain any religious worship, place, or ministry contrary to his or their mind, or to do or suffer any other act or thing contrary to their religious persuasion. There shall be an assembly yearly chosen by the freemen thereof to consist of 4 persons out of each county, which assembly shall have the power to prepare bills in order to pass into laws, and shall have all other powers and privileges of an assembly according to the rights of the freeborn subjects of England. The principles laid out in the second paragraph above reflect the influence of which of the following? A, the growth of deism. B, Enlightenment values. C, English mercantilist policies. Or D, European ethnocentric benefits. Sir, I'm not meaning to ignore your question, but I've got everybody on these topics right now, and so I'm keeping it centered on where we're at and not diverting all over the place, because then the entire chat goes off. So if you stick around, I'll be happy to. I will take questions, but I don't want to take them off topic. So I'm not meaning to ignore your question at all. Okay, so you're saying Enlightenment values, friends. Let's take a look. Thank you, Daniel. Glad you're learning something. So this is the idea that we're coming into thinking about Enlightenment thought and how it works in the colonies, and of course its political influence over the development of the eventual United States. So you want to think about things like John Locke, Enlightenment thought, natural law, the idea of logical, rational thought, and the idea that people were supposed to be able to have a representative government, and that was that Republican, small r, Republican form of government is born out of these ideas. So if you think about the idea that you have that going back to even the House of Burgesses being established in 1619 in Virginia, this is something that is not a new idea to any of the colonies by the time that William Penn establishes this in the Charter for Pennsylvania. So let's take a look at your next question from this stimulus. How did the principles laid out in the Charter affect the demographic makeup of Pennsylvania in the 17th and 18th centuries? A. Pennsylvania attracted a population that was more disproportionately male than any of the other 13 English colonies. B. Pennsylvania imported more enslaved Africans than any other colony. C. Pennsylvania became one of England's most diverse North American colonies. Or D. Backcountry farmers came into conflict with American Indians. Nice, 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 nice. And you are correct. Let's go to another question. Which of the following was established around similar religious goals? Massachusetts Bay Colony, Jamestown, South Carolina, or Maryland? Dr. Simon, I will get to Abraham Lincoln when we get there. Although that sounds like an essay question, and that would be something you guys would need to do, but we'll talk about that later. Right now, I'm on colonial Pennsylvania and Maryland. Okay, so you guys are saying D, Maryland, and with good cause, because we know that Maryland was started by the Catholics. However, they wanted to try to allow Christians of every sect, but you had to be Christian. So that's the difference between that of William Penn in Pennsylvania and what you do see in Maryland. But there are similar reasons for doing so. If you look at what William Penn says, it doesn't say you have to be Christian and believe in Jesus or Jesus Christ. It says that no person or persons inhabiting this province who shall confess and acknowledge one Almighty God. So that allows any of the monotheistic religions in the Judeo-Christian Muslim heritage to settle in Pennsylvania. So that's good. Glad you guys caught that. And let's go on to a new question, number 35. Here we have one. The Great Treaty of 1722. Brethren, our last meeting ended with so happy an agreement and such firm assurances and hearty resolutions on both sides that if they are faithfully observed, we shall always meet with joyful countenances. Me solemnly not to have any correspondence with the French, but to depend entirely on the English and cleave close to them, that you would keep the path open for the far Indians to come into trade with this province, that you would never molest Virginia or any of the other king's provinces for the future, and that you allowed it was vain to promise anything unless you resolved to perform it. I begin, therefore, by demanding you of solemn assurance that you will continue firm to what you then engaged, and you will then inform me truly of your principal late transactions and designs, and advice with me upon them, so that I may be convinced that you have an entire confidence in me, and observe an exact sincerity in your whole conduct towards me, which will be the strongest ties of lasting friendship between us. We look at the source. Ratified Treaty Number 1, the Great Treaty of 1722 between the Five Nations, the Mohicans, and the colonies of New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. All right. Ryan Ross, you wanted a hard one? Here you go. This is a harder one. The passage above was most clearly a response to competition among colonial powers to enslave Native Americans, competition among European rivals to forge alliances with indigenous tribes, the threat of Spanish trade along the Santa Fe Trail interfering with British mercantilism, or D, the English colonists' dissatisfaction with colonial controls. Okay, so you guys are saying B. Why? What in that stimulus tells you it's B? The other answers are worse. We do have, it doesn't say anything about slavery. It implies trade alliances with natives. We have, the other answers were worse. We have you, natives, promised me, English guy, not to have relations with the French. Okay, they tell the natives no franchise or French fries. Okay, I don't know that I'm getting that. Yeah, I'm going to start knocking you out if you're asking me more about Lincoln stuff. So I made it very clear where we're at with Lincoln. And so you're saying B, and you're saying because you natives promised me, English guy, not to have relations with the French. Got it. Got it, Ryan. And you're correct. Let's take a look at that. Take a quick intermission, and we'll be right back. Okay, I'm back, everybody. Janina, be nice. I just had to grab some French fries. I was getting hungry again. Okay. Let's look at some more with the Native American Treaty. And then we'll move to the different time period. So the methods described in the passage were most similar to those of the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, or the French. That question is from the same treaty stimulus, Great Treaty of 1722, Daniel. Okay, we're going to leave the Lincoln one alone for a minute. No Lincoln until we're there. Ryan, no more. So looking back at the Treaty of 1722, you're saying D, the French. So I've had 4 Ds. I'm going to go with that since this one seems to be throwing you a little bit. And you're right. The only group that we know of what you saw in that list that really worked with any kind of alliances was the French. So there is the idea that there's not a lot to do with alliances, so to speak, with the British in terms of the natives. What you do find here is if you look at the year, you're starting to march towards some change. Now you're still 32 years, some years out from having the French and Indian War or the 7 Years' War, but we do know that there are some attempts to try to gain the loyalties of the natives in that regard. But what's really good about this question is that while maybe we didn't read or do the Treaty of 1722, what is really good is that you do have to make sure that you're able to try to reason through questions that you may not be completely familiar with in terms of what you might get on an actual exam, say the AP exam. You won't get a question specifically like this about this particular stimulus tomorrow, but you would get you do need to be aware of how the colonies manage their relationships with natives. So same stimulus. This is supposed to be a more difficult one. The excerpt above was most likely a result of A, the competition over natural resources in the New World, B, dissatisfaction among British settlers on the frontier regarding their lack of protection against Indian attacks, C, fear of enslaved Africans allying with Native Americans and engaging in armed insurrections, or D, the desire of British colonial officials to reach peaceful accommodations with warring native tribes on the frontier to stimulate westward settlement. Okay, we have 2 Ds. Three Ds. Hey, get it? 3D. I need at least a fourth one. Okay. George, I would not go with natives as natural resources. Not even in their mindset. Okay, let's make sure that we keep the um, comments okay. So one thing to keep in mind is that I would not count the natives as natural resources. I wouldn't even call the slaves that are in the South natural resources in that regard. You can't mine people. Thank you. Okay. So that's good. Um, so I'm getting some A's and some D's right now with my law of four. I have 4 D's and 2 A's. Is there anybody who wishes to change their answer based upon some of the reasoning here? So that would be George, Daniel, George, and Zubair. George, were you changing your answer? Is that what you're saying? Even ooh, Daniel, that's not a good way to be a leader, man. Felipe said D. All right, well, I'm going to go with D because I'm not getting to lots of things. So, but D wasn't the correct answer. A was correct. They're looking to control rich natural resources. Um, and A is the best answer in that regard. The British sought to deprive the French of trade. Um, the statement said, "Promise me solemnly not to have any correspondence with the French, to depend entirely on the English and cleave close to them." So, if you look at your other answer choices, um, what you're saying is somebody said the document talked about trade. George says, even if the Europeans didn't see the natives as natural resources, the document doesn't imply anything about a war, and natives provided access to natural resources. That's a good one. So, um, don't ever trust me. Trust the doc. I love it. But George, and I think it's Bupala. I want to make sure I'm saying it right because I don't have you in my class, and I hate to mispronounce names. But um, what you guys have said is correct, and I think it's a really good point to make sure that you're looking there to see that it does not imply things about war. However, there's one thing I can say is that D is, to me, probably one of the more logical wrong answers. Bupala, got it. Thank you. Um, so um, I would say that when you're looking at this, I would expect you to choose D as an incorrect answer if I was expecting incorrect answers. But So one of the things that you can look at here is that, it doesn't say anything about war or that they're trying to make any kind of alliances about stimulating westward settlement. So what you're doing here is, and this is why D would be a logical wrong answer from a teacher perspective. What you're doing there is you're looking at what sounds reasonable, but it doesn't ask you what sounds reasonable. It asks you what does the document say, essentially. What was it the result of? And we have to go off of what's in the document. So, okay, let's move time periods. Before we move time periods, and listen very carefully to my friends in the room, we have now covered the beginnings of APUSH period 3, and these are the areas that are most distant from what we have just studied in the last 3 weeks. In the last 3 weeks, we did period 4 and 5. So looking at anything from 1491 to 1754, to where we get just before the 7 Years' War, what particular questions might you have about those two time periods that we may not have answered? I'll give you a minute to type some questions out that are not about Lincoln. Ryan, I'm doing mostly periods 1 through 3, only because you have just gone through period 4 and 5 and literally tested on those within the last 7 days, and actually had 2 study sessions on them as well. So I'm doing what's going to be the most distant material for you. I'm not going to do a second one tomorrow night, only because I don't want to do anything that might be seen as helping 3rd and 4th over first period only, so who has their exam tomorrow. So can you come in tomorrow and look at your test? So far, no one's got any questions about the time period 1491 to 1754. The format of tomorrow's test is all stimulus question. It is, as I've said many times, it is all taken from AP materials that are given to teachers in secured settings to use for things like midterm exams. It's about evenly decided, it's about equally divided between the 5 time periods. And yeah. All 3 APUSH teachers are giving a similar exam format, so you shouldn't see anything wildly different between what I've described to you and what might be in your classes if you're with Spilkin or AGS. They may add questions to their exam that I didn't. I don't know. I'm giving you a 55 question exam. Are the questions on the midterm like test questions? Asks Valentina. I don't, but like, you mean like your unit tests or like your quiz questions? They're going to be like the unit test questions, but they're going to be, I'll say this much. I think the unit tests are just, at least in my class, for my students, I think they're a little if you kind of rank them in order of difficulty, I would say quizzes are the most difficult. Unit tests are less difficult than quizzes in that they're not quite as specific as quizzes tend to be, because the quizzes are specifically over the reading, where unit tests are more about the stimulus and big picture. And then for the, because we give you questions that are like what the College Board gives out as questions that are written for AP exams, and they give them to teachers to use on midterms and finals. Like I said, through their secured accounts. So don't go trying to search for anything. You're not going to find it. I think they're easier. I think the AP exam in general is easier than what you're encountering in school. Since I didn't come out quite right. So I think your midterm's easier than even my unit tests, personally. And last year's group did really, really well on theirs. It's not the exact same. In fact, I went through it, and I had all kinds of different questions that I had to pull from different sources to make the midterm last year, because the College Board hadn't released these resources to their teachers until later in the school year after the term had ended. So, okay. So let's do a little bit of some colonial independence and revolution. I'm going to try to go with some things that you haven't seen before. Is this like an official test? I don't know what you mean by that. Yeah, it is kind of it is an official test. I don't know how to answer that. Yes, it is like a College Board exam. Let's go with something that's a little more difficult. Sarah, I said you could come in and look over the test. I'm sorry. Okay. Here we have a picture. Which of the following is not a cause of the ideal of Republican motherhood? It is not a released exam from the College Board. In other words, you're not going to go online and find it, because it's something only given to teachers. Okay, you're saying A. Oh. Whoa. Take a look at this for just a second. Read that carefully. I will be right back. Okay, my mouth's kind of full. Sorry, but does this make sense now? Daniel says he got it now. Michelle Zong says she got it now. Good. Okay. Let's go on to the next one. Which of the following is the best description of the picture? So let's go through the answer choices and then I'll scroll up to the picture again. This image called on women to teach Republican values within the family. The image called on women to take a more active role in female chores. This image called on women to take on a man's role during wartime. Or this image called on women to be more independent and look for positions outside of the home to increase their equality. You guys are going pretty firm with A there. So let's take a look. And you're right. By Jove, you are right. Does child raising count as a chore? I think that depends on who you ask, but I would say it is, as far as it's hard work. But the women in this picture demonstrates that idea of being a wonderful mother, um, and this idea of having women in charge of the family and being the educator and the nurturer of the family and instilling those civic values. But I think it's interesting that Sarah Ron said what she said about the artist and his family. But if it's not a strong suit, make sure to look at the citation of the stimulus. So if you look here, the artist has chosen to give the woman a nice prominent role in the in the foreground. In fact, in front of him, we see well-dressed children. So we're getting the fact that this is a wealthy family. We're seeing that the well-dressed children are here and that they appear to be cooperating with one another. It looks like the child is giving, I don't have my glasses on, but it looks like an apple perhaps, or maybe they're tossing a ball. But it looks like an apple to me. And everybody is cooperative and wonderful. And these are values that are American. So there you go. Let's go to the next question. Here we go. Which of the following would the woman in the image most likely have used to fulfill her responsibilities as a Republican mother? Abolitionist ideals, the ideals of Federalist Paper Number 10, ideas of women's suffrage, or immigration reform? Daniel. Looks like we have some people who are stymied here. George says, Republican motherhood mostly to do with education. Upala says, Republican mothers' success rests in their ability to educate and not to participate directly, so therefore it cannot be C. We have some people saying B, B seeming more reasonable. Okay. And you're correct, which is nice. Now, that's some good reasoning I've seen here. You had to think about this one for a minute. And so what does Federalist number 10 say? George Chang says, wasn't that the one against factions and all that? Yes. Factions and how checks and balances would try to keep the factions in check. No pun intended. But so I really liked the reasoning I saw here with Bupala makes the point of saying Republican mothers are supposed to educate, not participate directly, so it couldn't have been women's suffrage. And George saying Republican motherhood had mostly to do with education. So thinking about your choices that are here, if you're looking at Republican motherhood and the idea that the mother is supposed to instill Republican values in the children, abolitionism doesn't really speak to Republican values directly. Now, you may argue that abolitionism has more to do with the concept of freedom and equality to an extent. Not always as the abolitionists believed it, but at least in our modern conception of it. And you could say that those are values of republicanism, but think about what Republican government is supposed to represent. It's supposed to represent a government that is formed by the consent of the governed, responsible to the governed, and it was in terms of American Republican government, it was a government formed not with abolition of slavery in mind. So abolitionist ideas in and of themselves wouldn't meet the criteria of this question. The next best one that I could see that you guys were looking at was C, ideas of women's suffrage. But if you're looking at women's suffrage in that regard, keep in mind that that would have been something that wasn't possible at the time. Now, again, not saying that you don't have women that recognize the hypocrisy of that. Women such as Abigail Adams is a perfect example of that, and she's representative of all women who had had any inkling of education and could read and write, and that does not represent all colonial era women or revolutionary era women for that matter, because we know that the women received less of an education than did men, and the majority of the population in this time is not formally educated beyond beyond even what we would call primary school, if there's even such a thing where they live. More likely, they aren't literate, and that is something that is a privilege that was left for a privileged few. So women's suffrage would not be part of Republican motherhood because it wasn't part of the society in which the Republican mother would have lived. And immigration reform, we're not quite there yet. Um, so good reasoning on that one, and I'm glad that you guys shared that, and I wanted to talk you through that just a little bit. No, we're not here yet. Let's go away from this one. Let's go back to the question list. Going in period 3. Let's look at something like Federalist 51 for a minute, because it's been a while for those. We're going to go for about 15 more minutes, just giving you a time check there. But if you're looking at Federalist 51, written by Madison and Hamilton, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of the place. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. In framing a government, which is to be administered by men over men, the great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. This excerpt is referring to which basic principle of government as expressed in the U.S. Constitution of 1787? Federalism, popular sovereignty, limited government, or checks and balances? I've got 4 B's and a D. I have 5 B's now. And no one can change their answer. I've got 5 V's, a D, and Janina has said a D. Sarah Juan says it's D. Daniel thinks anything that Bupala says must be true. Janina? Ooh. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 D's and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 B's. So oh wow, I'm getting oh, we're now at I'm gonna go D. Do-do. Janina, if there's anything I have taught you, my friend, dear girl, is that you should always trust your gut instinct. And Sarah Juan, I'm going to extend that to you. You went with D, probably because you might have been right here. So the 51 Federalists, we studied Federalists number 10 and 51. And what it says is that this was the idea that the government contains checks and balances to limit its power so that no one becomes more powerful than the other. So if you look here, federalism isn't correct because it's not what's necessarily discussed in the document. Federalism is the way in which the federal government would share its powers with the state governments as a way of trying to make sure that states retain some concept of political sovereignty that they had enjoyed prior to the Constitution under the Articles and as colonies. But federalism doesn't necessarily get to the idea of federalism doesn't always get to the idea of what this is talking about. This is talking about having the government being able to control itself. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. Certain things must be put into control to control the abuses of government. So what we have here is checks and balances. Popular sovereignty is based upon consent of the people. And C is the idea that you have limited government here is not necessarily going to be the idea that the fact that you have a constitution and you define what the government does, that is the concept of limited government. Interesting discussion on that one. 8th grade, that's ancient history. Still on the Federalist number 51, which of the following would be the best example of the ideas expressed in the excerpt? Presidential pardon of a person who has committed a federal crime, or Congress overriding a Supreme Court ruling with a 2/3 majority vote in both the House and the Senate, the Senate confirmation of a new Supreme Court justices that have been nominated by the president, or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court breaking a tie vote in the U.S. Senate. Okay, so Philippe has said B. Willie has said B. Daniel has said B. Philippe is changing his answer. Wait, no, C. But Michelle Zhang, Orson Wong, and Bupala are all saying B. Oh, Philippe, you've been outvoted, my friend. And you were right. You were exactly right. Philippe Hansen. Esruk. Congress can't override a Supreme Court decision, my friends. They do, in the Senate, have confirmation responsibilities of any presidential appointments. Supreme Court does not break a tie vote in the U.S. Senate. And presidents do have the ability to issue a pardon over somebody accused of a crime, any crime in this country. But that's not necessarily an idea of checks and balances. Oh, Willie. No, Willie, you can't get out of this. You can't blame it on technology. No, none of you can blame it on technology. Bupala said Congress can only override the president with a 2/3 vote. That is correct. That's where this gets you, is you know that because of that 2/3 majority vote. but the Supreme Court is what makes that wrong. No one can really override a Supreme Court ruling unless you count that you can amend the Constitution after a Supreme Court ruling to make something that has once been called unconstitutional constitutional. That's the only way that you'd undo a Supreme Court ruling. Otherwise, the only way a Supreme Court ruling is undone is if the Supreme Court undoes it. Daniel, I'm not turning off slow chat because it keeps some of you from completely going blah, 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 as you answer questions in chat tonight. It's actually made this very interesting and able to be read from my perspective. And remember, as much as I love all of you and I give my time to you for 2.5+ hours to go over final exam reviews, midterm exam reviews, in the end, it's all about me. So, Zubair, you can't say your phone chose B because it's not Kahoot, my friend. But good try. And let's take a look at your next question. Federal, no, we're not going to do this. We're not 20th century yet. So let's go back to our question list. Okay, so let's take a look at our topics and you get to choose. Let's do difficult to easy. Daniel's talking about sentience now. Okay, we can get Hamilton versus Jefferson. I don't want you to look at American art. We did Federalist first. Federalist 51. Colonial Tavern Rule, I'd rather you not do. We did Republican Motherhood. Let's don't do women in the 15th Amendment because that's later. Religion in the American Revolution. The idea of George Washington's presidency. Again, we've done Republican Motherhood. Influence of the Enlightenment. Washington and Justices. Shays' Rebellion. Ideals of the American Revolution. Ready? Daniel, I'll be very happy to answer any of your questions on planes when we're done with the this. Okay, so we're going to look at. You guys, tell me what you want. Hamilton versus Jefferson. Religion in the American Revolution. Washington's presidency. Influence of the Enlightenment. Washington's Justices. Shays' Rebellion. Or Ideals of the American Revolution. No, we're not at Lincoln versus the Confederacy. I literally did that 48 hours ago with you. Oh, 72 hours now. Okay, tell me, what is your question about Lincoln versus the Confederacy? And it cannot be with the rise of Lincoln. That's an essay question. George, I did not do that stream. So, Philippe, what do you want to know about Lincoln versus Confederacy? Oh, wait. So I completely went off track. Oh, I like this one. Tattoo it on my head. No SAQ on Tuesday.
For the 3 millionth time. This right here.
Okay, so Michelle Zong has asked, besides Lincoln, who were supporters of the free soil doctrine? Valentina, I'm just giving you crap. Although I have said it like 100 times. But you know what? I'm here to serve you, Valentina, and I'm glad that you were able to learn it. I am sorry for my frustration, and I will atone for my sins. Besides Lincoln, who else were supporters of free soil doctrine? Well, there could be the Free Soil Party. Anybody else want to take a stab at Michelle's question? Zubair said Republicans, which is pretty good. Western white farmers. Why, Jason? So, Jason, you said Western white farmers, and you said because they didn't want slave plantations to overtake them. Logical, reasonable answer. All has got some good um, questions there. Or good. I'm sorry, you had a good explanation there, not a question. Also, Michelle, I don't know if you were looking specifically at maybe political parties, but there is this as well. So, can you guys see the Word document? Okay, hold on one second. Hi, everybody. Give me a second here. So if you're looking here at this handout that I'd given you, you can also look at the idea that you had, if you had to look, you have your Whigs who did oppose the Mexican War. And so you could just even from that say the Whigs were probably going to be more free soil. And then when you look at your Whigs, you also have your Northern conscious Whigs who later go to the Free Soil Party and into the Republicans. So if you do have that question about political parties, there's another way of looking at it as well. Um, and what Bupala said is a really good explanation. And Jason Picker gave a really good answer of an example of who would be somebody involved. So you have your Northern conscience Whigs, and you have your Free Soil Party, who some of which grew out of some of the Northern Whigs when they split, and of course, Republican Party is a good one as well. So, okay, open Q&A time before we're done. I'm just looking at the time. So Margaret says the Kansas-Nebraska Act led to the formation of the Republican Party. If we go back to that, if you want to look at that really quick, give me just a second. So if you're looking here, yes, the Kansas-Nebraska Act is a kind of, I like the word coalition, what they say here, what's on this handout. So any independent Democrats who were not Democrats tied to Southerners in particular, but anybody who was opposed to the free war, which were mostly like Northern Whigs, who later get called the conscience Whigs. And then, of course, but you have other groups that, I mean, it's not like they were just the conscience Whigs, obviously. But when the Kansas-Nebraska bill is passed and essentially repeals the Missouri Compromise for that part of the former Louisiana Purchase territory, yes, it does lead to the formation of the new Republican Party, which is the idea that a little more of the idea of initially trying to believe and bring back that imagery of Republican government, Republican small r, and making the party resemble more of what they believed American politics was supposed to be about. And it was an opposition party to begin. Jason Picker, yes, and I will. You're welcome, Margaret. And Jason says, "Can we come in tomorrow to look at our test?" You can. And Jason, I saw that you sent me a remind during the session. I will look at that when I'm done, and I'll reply to you if it's not too late for you, and I'll be happy to reply. We've just been in the remind session the whole time. What other questions do you have? I'm looking over at the chat window right now. Have you guys looked at the web page with the overview videos? So this is my so this is what I was saying to Val earlier when I kept saying this, except I didn't realize you probably couldn't see it. Daniel B. read the Princeton book, watched the videos. Good. They are a little long, I told you. So please tell me again how you don't know what to do with your paper when you're done. After I said 3 times, wrote it on the board and tattooed it on my head. And I don't know what VATSIM is. I think I know what VATSIM is. So anybody else that's out there that isn't in my class, okay, I'm glad you can see that right now. And if you go to what's not showing for some reason, APUSH history, helpful study links, midterm exam, you've got a couple of things here that you could look at. I would say tonight, if you're looking at Valentina, don't worry. That's just airplane nerds talking. And I say that as an airplane nerd, so that's not an insult to Zubair and Daniel. You've got the super quick review over periods 1 through 5. Super quick meaning about 12 minutes, 11 and a half minutes or so. This one is much longer. This one is about 39, 40 minutes. And so these two would be the last things I'd say. If you haven't watched them already, watch them. Watch them as your last thing to do before you're done. So good, Margaret. That's awesome. I've got more specific key concept videos here. That you may want to look at. Okay, wait. So Daniel, Zubair, Jason, as much as I love airplane talk, we're going to stop for just a minute. Glad you found them helpful. So any other questions about the exam before I discontinue? Okay. Zubair asks, what do we do if we finish early? And Daniel says, will we go into a lesson? Sorry, everybody. I accidentally hit the mute button. Uh, what you asked was, will we go into a lesson after the final? Um, no, we will not have a history lesson. We'll have a writing lesson. So yes, but not content. Um, do I know any last minute cram resources? The chapter outlines are a good one, but I don't have any ideas as far as any specific other ones that I would recommend. See, 55 questions. Yes, that's correct. APNotes.net is, I've not seen APNotes.net, but I don't dispute you. If you went and put like cram, APUSH, midterm or semester finals or something like that, you might find some good stuff. There's people that have done this. Keep in mind, some things might be aligned more to the old exam format, but is the midterm uniform among all classes? Um, we collaborated on it, but I don't know if Aguilar or Spilkin is doing anything that might be different from what I'm doing. So they are similar in terms of what I've been describing to you tonight would be similar between the three classes. I don't know that I would call them uniform, but we're taking a common approach. We do discuss what we do with our classes. So, any other questions? I'm getting so tired. I got circles under my eyes. Okay, I will declare the study session itself over. Um, but Daniel Begg, you said you had a question for me. Oh, that's a good question. I haven't been on the 787 yet. I'm a fan of the 777, but I don't know that I've been on the 9. I think I've only been on the I guess that would be the 8. But I've never flown on the 87 yet. So then how would you ask me that? I can't even been on the 9. I haven't even been on an 87 at all. You might be more of a geek than I am. I haven't followed plane news in a long time. Yeah, that's right. Daniel, you're correct. I agree with you on that one, and that's what I have been on. Can I quickly explain um, what happened to the Dutch when they founded New Jersey and Delaware? Um, Valentina, that is going to be the funniest joke I've ever seen. So Natalie Lee, well, the Dutch didn't find they didn't found New Jersey and Delaware. Um, those were grants by the British. The Dutch move into New Jersey in particular. I only know that more so because after the British take over, they move in there in great numbers in New Jersey. And I know that more from my own family history because my family were colonial Dutch in New Amsterdam. So the Dutch were settlers, let's say, in those areas. I think Boeing supports an American company. It does help our economy, but it does also put rich money in the rich executives' pockets. What is the best airline to fly, in my opinion? Have I tried more than one? I've never flown Emirates. I'm a big fan of British Airways. I've never flown Qatar. I've never flown Etihad. On all the U.S. airlines, I'm a big fan of American. American and United. They both have Chicago ties, so it's got a lot to do with that. I do like British Airways. I liked KLM. I've flown Austrian. Austrian was really cool. Even on like an hour and 10-minute flight, we got a full meal. It was great. Loved it. Yeah, I fly American a lot, Sarah. Any other questions? Because I'm going to go because the longer I do this, the longer it takes me to get back into the grade book. I still got to get ready for bed and all that stuff. It was low key. All right, everybody. I really had a good time tonight. And everybody have a good time tomorrow for Halloween. If I don't see you because you're in third or fourth period, then be careful and good luck on your first and second period finals. And for those of you who aren't in my class, thanks for joining me. You can join me anytime. I know our exam dates don't always line up, but you're welcome anytime. So you're all very welcome. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure, and I'm happy to do it. And I am around tomorrow, so come by and see me if you have any questions, okay? Take care. Have a great night. I'm about to end this, y'all. Have a good night.